The village of Eldermoor had clung to the Carpathian foothills for longer than memory could recount. Its timbered houses weathered to silver gray by mountain winds and winter snows. For generations, the mountain spring had been its lifeblood, a thread of pure water that wove through irrigation channels built by ancestors whose names were now carved into the church bell tower. But that summer, the thread snapped. The drought came without warning. One morning, the channels ran dry. By week's end, the wells showed only stone. The wheat fields, which should have swayed like golden banners, stood brittle and brown. Livestock grew lean. Children stopped playing in the lanes, their laughter replaced by the thin wail of hunger. The village priest, Father Matthias, held extra masses, and the smithy stopped ringing his anvil at noon, as if silence might coax moisture from the sky. Oliver was barely 12, a wisp of a boy with wrists thin as willow switches, but his mind worked in patterns others missed. When Eldermoor had been threatened by timber raiders the previous winter, it wasn't the blacksmith's brawn or the mayor's authority that saved them. It was Oliver's observation that the frozen creek would bear the raiders' weight, and his plan to crack the ice with heated stones. The village remembered. Now, as the council gathered in the stone church, Oliver stood at the back, his faithful donkey Milo waiting outside, ears twitching at the solemn voices within. Mayor Magnus Blackwood, a bear of a man whose voice normally filled the square, spoke quietly. "The spring at the summit is our only hope. Something must have blocked it." The men nodded, their faces grim. They would leave at dawn. "I'll come too," Oliver said. The council turned. Aaron, Oliver's eldest brother, frowned. "This is men's work. Stay with the women and tend the little ones." But Oliver didn't step back. "Who here has climbed the Eagle's Pass?" "I have. Last autumn, when we hunted the stag that was troubling the northern pastures. I know where the path crumbles and where the vipers nest." The men exchanged glances. It was true. The boy had a preternatural sense for the mountains. "He may be small," said old Cedric the shepherd, "but his eyes see further than most." Milo was harnessed to a small sledge, carrying rope and tools. The brothers, Aaron, Samuel, and Albert, rode their horses, but Oliver walked beside Milo, one hand on the donkey's neck, talking softly about the constellations they would see once night fell. The path rose through pine forests where the needles were already falling dry, then switchbacked up shale slopes where the only sound was stone grinding under hoof. They reached the summit by afternoon. What they found silenced them. The spring's mouth was sealed by a boulder the size of a cottage. It had sheared from the cliff face above, perhaps in the last earthquake, and settled as if placed by a giant's hand. Water pooled behind it, a vast subterranean lake pressing against the stone. The men threw their weight against it. They wedged iron bars into cracks. They tied ropes and heaved until their muscles trembled. The boulder didn't shift a finger's breadth. "It cannot be moved," Samuel gasped, wiping sweat from his eyes. "Not without oxen and tackle we don't have." Oliver had been studying the cliff, his head tilted. Now he pointed upward. "That ledge there, the boulder rests against it. If we could lever from above." Albert followed his gaze and shook his head. "No man can climb that. It's sheer as glass." They made camp that night, defeated. Milo shared his meager oats with Oliver, who sat awake, sketching lever systems in the dust with a stick. Above them, the stars were hard points of light, in a sky that offered no rain. It was then the phoenix first appeared. Oliver saw it first, a silhouette against the moon, vast wings blocking entire constellations. It circled once, twice, its cry like a trumpet of brass and thunder. The horses stamped and whinnied. The men reached for their spears. "Don't," Oliver whispered, though he couldn't have said why. The bird wasn't attacking. It was observing. Its eyes caught the moonlight, and burned like molten gold. Then it was gone, vanished into the peaks. And next morning, the council of war was brief. They would return to the village for tools, for draft animals, for anything that might shift the stone. The descent was faster than the climb, gravity pulling them homeward. They were entering the narrow defile called Wolf's Throat when the wyvern struck. It came from above, a serpent with wings, its scales ash gray against the rocks. Not a true dragon. Those were creatures of legend, but a wyvern, clever and cruel, drawn by the village's desperation. It landed on the path ahead, blocking their way, its tail lashing. The horses reared. Samuel's mount slipped, nearly pitching him into the ravine. The wyvern's head dipped toward the sledge, where supplies were stored: dried meat, hard cheese, the last of the village's provisions. Oliver didn't think. He grabbed his small hunting knife, the one his father had forged for him before he died, and dashed forward. "Leave our food!" The wyvern hissed, amused by this morsel that delivered itself. It struck, faster than a whip crack. Oliver rolled, Milo braying in terror behind him. The knife scored a line across the wyvern's snout, barely drawing blood. The beast roared, more in annoyance than pain, and rounded for the kill. From the sky came a sound like the world tearing. The phoenix slammed into the wyvern with the force of a catapult stone. Its talons, each as long as a man's forearm, ripped through wing membrane. The wyvern shrieked, a high sound of pain and surprise. The two tumbled, scales and feathers flying. Then, the phoenix had the wyvern by the neck. It lifted the serpent, ignored its thrashing, and dropped it into the ravine. The wyvern's shriek faded. The phoenix landed, breathing hard. In its left leg, Oliver saw the arrow, William's arrow, still embedded from the earlier attack. The creature's eyes met his, and in them Oliver saw not the rage of a beast, but the weary intelligence of something ancient. Slowly, Oliver approached. The phoenix watched him, motionless. Oliver grasped the arrow shaft. "This will hurt," he said softly, and pulled it free in one swift motion. The phoenix threw back its head and screamed, but it was a sound of release, not fury. When it looked at Oliver again, its gaze held something new. Recognition, perhaps. Gratitude, certainly. It spread its wings and leaped into the air, circling once before vanishing toward the peaks. The men were silent, shaken. Aaron stared at his brother. "How did you know it wouldn't kill you?" "I didn't," Oliver admitted. "But I knew it was in pain. And pain makes us all the same." They resumed their descent, but the mood had shifted. The phoenix was no longer a monster to be feared. It was a neighbor in the mountains, as tied to the land as they were. They were nearly home when Milo, scenting water in a way only donkeys can, veered from the path. He pulled the sledge into a hidden cleft, where a massive nest rested among boulders, twigs thick as fence posts, woven with dried moss and mountain flowers. In its center lay an egg. Not a bird's egg, but something the size of a rain barrel, its shell opalescent, catching the sun in waves of crimson and gold. "The phoenix's egg," Oliver breathed. Samuel's eyes lit with hunger. "Do you know how many mouths this would feed? Weeks, maybe months." "No." Oliver's voice was sharp. He stepped between his brother and the egg. "We take this, and the phoenix's mercy becomes our death sentence. You saw what it did to the wyvern." "That was a monster," Aaron said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is just an egg." "Which contains its child," Oliver said. "We steal this, and we become the monsters." They argued, but the decision was already made in their hearts. Hunger and fear whispered to them. They covered the egg with straw and lashed it to the sledge. Milo refused to pull at first, planting his foot and braying his protest, until Oliver whispered in his ear, "We must return it, but first We must show them. Back in Eldermoor, the discovery of the egg caused a furor. Women wept with relief. Men sharpened knives and brought iron pots. Children danced around the massive shell, imagining omelets that could feed them all. Only Oliver stood apart, his hand on Milo's neck, his eyes on the sky. "Please," he told Mayor Magnus, "return it before she comes." "She?" The mayor looked at him. "You think it's female?" "I think it's a parent," Oliver said. "And I think parents know when their children are taken." They didn't listen. The whetstone sang against steel. The fire pit was dug. Oliver watched his brothers, his neighbors, his friends, all choosing survival over honor. He understood, but he couldn't join them. They didn't listen. The whetstone sang against steel. The fire pit was dug. Oliver watched his brothers, his neighbors, his friends, all choosing survival over honor. He understood, but he couldn't join them. The phoenix came at dusk. Her shadow fell across the square like a storm cloud. Her cry shattered windows. She landed on the church steeple, talons gripping stone hard enough to crack it. Her eyes found the egg, saw the ropes that bound it, the eager crowd below. She dove. William the archer stood his ground, as was his duty. His arrow flew true, striking the phoenix's shoulder. She shrieked, not in pain, but in rage. The sound was physical, a wave that knocked children from their feet. She wheeled in the air, talons extended toward the archer. No, Oliver ran to the egg. He stood on it, arms spread, a speck of defiance before a force of nature. This wasn't William's choice, it was ours, mine. The phoenix froze, hovering, her wings beating a hurricane. Her eyes, molten gold like the setting sun, fixed on Oliver. "I know you're angry," Oliver said, his voice trembling but clear. "I would be too, but we're dying. The water's gone. We thought this was our only hope." The phoenix's gaze shifted to the villagers, cowering in doorways, to the dry canals, to Oliver's brothers, who had dropped their knives. Her wings stilled. She landed heavily before Oliver. The arrow in her shoulder broke against the stone. The message was clear: return what is mine. "I will," Oliver said. I'll take it back." "No," Aaron stepped forward, "it's too dangerous." "More dangerous than staying?" Oliver met his brother's eyes. "We can't fight her. We can't outrun her. But maybe we can make a friend." The phoenix watched this exchange, her head tilted in that uncanny, intelligent way. When Oliver climbed onto the sledge, she didn't attack. When Milo pulled the sledge forward, she followed, walking with a limping gait that tore at Oliver's heart. They left at dawn, just the boy, the donkey, and the phoenix trailing behind like a living storm cloud. The villagers watched them go, some in shame, some in fear, all in hope. The journey back through Wolf's throat was when the wyvern's mate found them. She came from below this time, slithering up the cliff face, her scales like burnished iron, her eyes fixed on the phoenix's egg with a reptilian hunger. Milo brayed a warning. The phoenix, weakened by her wound, spread her wings, but they trembled. The wyvern struck, not at the phoenix, but at Milo, knowing the donkey was the weakest link. The sledge tipped. The egg rolled. Oliver didn't think. He threw himself over the egg, his small knife in hand. The wyvern's jaws closed around his torso, lifting him. He screamed, then stabbed downward into the soft flesh of her throat. The wyvern dropped him. He rolled, gasping, as the phoenix lunged. But this time, the phoenix was too weak. The wyvern's tail whipped around, catching her injured wing. They tumbled together, a tangle of feathers and scales, toward the ravine. Oliver saw his chance. He grabbed the rope, the same rope that had bound the egg, and ran, not away, but toward the fight. He looped the rope around the wyvern's tail and shouted, "Milo, pull!" The donkey, faithful Milo, braced his legs and pulled. The rope went taut. The wyvern's strike went wide. The phoenix got her talons under the serpent's neck and with a final desperate heave, threw the beast into the abyss. Silence. Then the phoenix collapsed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Oliver crept to her side. Her wing was broken, her wounds bleeding. The egg was intact, but the phoenix was dying. "I brought something," Oliver said, pulling herbs from his satchel. "Comfrey for the bones, yarrow for the bleeding. My mother taught me, before she died." He worked as gently as he could, though his own ribs screamed where the wyvern had squeezed. The phoenix endured, her eyes on his face. When he was done, she rested her head on the ground, exhausted. "We'll stay," Oliver decided. "Until you're strong enough. The egg is safe here. I'll bring you water from the spring." He made the trip daily, up the narrow path, filling his water skin from the pool trapped behind the boulder, returning to dribble it into the phoenix's beak. Milo grazed on tough mountain grass. Days passed. The phoenix's breathing steadied. She began to preen her feathers one by one, with a mother's meticulous care. On the fourth day, she rose. Her wings still drooped, but her eyes were clear. She looked from Oliver to the blocked spring and back again. In that look, Oliver saw understanding. She spread her wings, not fully, but enough. She could fly, but not far, not home. "You want to help?" Oliver asked. "With the stone?" She dipped her head. Once. They worked together, boy and bird. Oliver chipped at the cliff edge above the boulder with his knife, seeking purchase. The phoenix, with her beak, pried loose stones that had held the boulder in place for centuries. It was slow, delicate work. One wrong move could send the whole mass tumbling, crushing them both. On the seventh day, the boulder shifted. Just a fraction, but the water behind it, pent up and yearning, did the rest. With a groan like the mountain waking, the stone rolled aside. Water erupted. Not a trickle, but a torrent, a river released from prison. It cascaded down the slopes, singing against the rocks, flooding the old channels, racing toward the valley. The phoenix lifted her head and called, a cry of triumph that echoed across the peaks. And she looked at Oliver. She nudged the egg toward him. Not as a gift, but as an offering, a trust. "I can't," Oliver said. "It's yours. It was always yours." The phoenix understood. She gently rolled the egg back into the nest. Then she did something Oliver would remember for the rest of his life. She plucked a single feather from her breast, gold and crimson, warm to the touch, and dropped it into his hands. Oliver took the feather back to Eldermoor. The villagers were waiting at the edge of the fields, where the returning water had already turned the oath dark and rich. They saw the feather and fell silent. It was more than a symbol. It was a promise. In the years that followed, Eldermoor never wanted for water again. The phoenix's feather hung in the church, above the baptismal font, and mothers told their children the story of the boy who chose trust over fear, friendship over force. Oliver grew tall and strong, but he never lost the quality that had saved them, the ability to see strength in gentleness and wisdom in waiting. Milo lived to a ripe old age, his coat graying, his steps slow. Every evening, Oliver would walk with him to the edge of the pasture, and they would watch the sunset together. Sometimes, if the light was just right, they could see a speck of fire against the mountain, the phoenix, circling her realm, her shadow a benediction over the village she had chosen to protect. And the lesson Oliver taught them, without ever having to speak it aloud, was this: that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act rightly despite it. That kindness to those we do not understand opens doors that force will forever keep barred. That a boy and a donkey, a village and a phoenix are not so different in their need for water, for home, for something worth protecting. In the end, the greatest magic was not the phoenix's fire, but Oliver's faith in his friend, in his people, in the possibility that even the wildest creature could become an ally if only one had the wisdom to offer help before demanding trust, and the courage to stand between danger and the innocent, whether they walked on 2 legs or 4, or soared through the sky on wings of flame.